My name is Ben, and I am your host of the Too Vague podcast this week. It's usually one word, two hosts, stories, trivia, and video games. But this week, it's one host, two game reviews, and one eulogy. I don't know if you've seen my social media posts, but one of my two podcasts passed away recently at the age of 21. So this impromptu episode, I thought it would be good to celebrate his being on this planet as long as he was by reading a eulogy that I wrote for him that I posted on Substack. So I will be doing two reviews first, and then at the end of the show, to wrap it all up, I'll be reading the eulogy. The following episode will be an episode that was delayed because of the couple weeks leading up to Bash's passing. Were kind of hectic, so the next one is going to be with Andrew on the word dragon, and we're going to talk about his ADHD pin that he just recently wrapped up selling on, I think it was Crowdfunder. So go check out Andrew's stuff. I think he does have some t-shirts and other things with the Advanced Dungeons Have Dragons logo on it that aren't the special enamel pin that he was selling with his crowdfunder campaign. So I will put his links in the show notes for you, and you can go ahead and check out his stuff because it's really cool. I said we were going to talk about two game reviews this week. The first one I'm going to cover is a game called MiceGard. It was developed by Game Dynasty and Aivictory, or Aivictory, all one word, and published by Valkyrie Initiative. It's sort of a casual adventure strategy game, which has some shooting elements to it. It's Norse mythology themed. You play a character named Micel, M-I-C-E-L. I guess that's how you would pronounce it. I don't know. I'm not a Viking. You're in a battle, and your village has been destroyed by the frogs, led by the evil Toadon, the frog with a monocle and a top hat, so you know he's evil. As the protagonist, you go on adventures and progress the story by going through levels and collecting resources, revealing the story through the dialogue between the characters. It's a top-down sort of thing where the mice in your party, you've got one of three formations you can use. One where the mice in your party, they all attack the closest enemy, and by attack I mean hit them with their swords. They wander off and hit the closest enemy. They also mine the resource for you. There's only one resource, and it's pebbles. You collect these pebbles, and then you can go back to your village and rebuild, which will increase stats and give you extra moves. It's very, very basic. There's probably about 6 different upgrades, I believe, that you can do to your village, and then it's done. Back to the formations. So you've got your individual formation where you are just wandering about and hitting a single enemy. There's a defensive formation, which is basically a ring around. It's basically 6 mice total on this ring, and then they will hit their swords. So you basically protect the inside of that ring, and then there is a move you can unlock, which is basically kind of a stun move. Finally, it's a sort of an archery formation. It's a more of an offensive formation where all of your characters shoot arrows. And so that one you use for hitting enemies at a distance. There are some enemies that have leaf shields that you need to knock that out. Actually, the special move for that formation, which is a triangle, is this charging formation. So that will knock the leaves off that they're holding. There are a couple of levels in there that are departures of this 3 formation thing that you have. There are 2 that are more like shooting levels. One where you're controlling a boat and shooting enemies that are approaching you from the right. And then there's one with just a ballista that you're just shooting single spears at enemies approaching. That's basically the nuts and bolts of the gameplay. It didn't take too long to play all the way through. I think it was, for me, it took about 3 hours total. It's not very complex. It's a very, very small experience. It's enjoyable, but it wasn't complex enough for me personally. It was very cutesy, and the Norse mythology element to it was kind of interesting from a storytelling perspective. If you're looking for a very relaxing kind of casual game, you might like it. A couple things that I would have liked. I wish there was more complexity of the different mouse formations and shooting formations and things like that. They could have done a lot more. And also there's a thing where once you start the game, you can't really restart it. It might be the copy that I have, which was a pre-release copy, but there was no way to restart the game after you had completed all the levels. So it's just a one-shot deal. It felt a lot like a student project more than anything else. It didn't have a lot of the things you would expect a full, even an indie product to have. Like there was no map. The resources you get, there was only one resource, which was pebbles, and that was a pretty throwaway sort of thing. But just the thing where you can't reset the game, you can't start from the beginning, there are no save slots. It's like those things, if you're presenting this to someone as an idea, that's what it feels like. Like I said, it feels like a student project more than anything. But yeah, it was super cute, very casual, not my cup of tea, but there you go. So MiceGard, check it out. I'll put the link to the Steam page in the show notes. On to the next game. It's another type of game that generally I don't play. It's this game that's called The Bridge Curse 2. The Extraction. The game was developed by Softstar Entertainment and published by PQube and Gamera Games. It was based on the Bridge Curse franchise, which is a Taiwanese origin franchise that started with a movie that came out, The Bridge Curse, in 2020, and has also had 2 video games. The general idea is there is a haunted school and a group of kids at the school who investigate the strange happenings and all the spooky ghost hunting things. So that is basically the general idea of the Bridge Curse franchise. But in the Bridge Curse 2 Extraction, it's the first-person perspective horror game that has a whole bunch of puzzles, jump scares, and it's mostly stealth gameplay. There's a lot of running away from stuff, from ghostly figures and weird people with their head disconnected and or just like broken at the neck, very much like The Ring looking things. In The Bridge Curse 2, it starts out with you playing a reporter who travels to Wen Hao University to investigate a particular ghost story. Su Lian. You know, I'm just not going to butcher the names here. There are 4 playable characters that as you go through the story, you switch between them. They don't really have any differences in how they move or what they do. It's a story-driven mechanic. But what all of your characters are doing are hiding or solving puzzles or doing things like breaking curses or breaking through things with a special spirit lantern. As far as the story goes, it was translated okay, but I mean, I don't know what to compare it to. It's a very strange story. Some of the dialogue didn't sound 100%. The dialogue was in English, so I listened to it that way, played through with the English spoken. You start out playing this reporter, you run into a security guard type of a person, and then things start getting strange, and it's got a lot of jump scares, a lot of scary things chasing after you, and then it switches to you've got a group of 3 students who are members of a film club at the university, and you're making sort of a horror film documentary style thing about this particular ghost at the university and this ghost story, and your characters get wrapped up in that. So because it seems like this is probably better to just read from their page. According to the press release that I got, this is how they summarize the game. Set within the haunting halls of Wen Hao University, renowned for its eerie ghost tales across Taiwan, the university's film club hatches a plan to recruit new members. A daring group of students orchestrated the Carnival of Horror within the infamously haunted Da Ren building, intent on resurrecting a decades-old campus mystery for their planned viral horror film. They plunge into the depths of the night to shoot, not to physically shoot, but to shoot their film. Yet as the cameras roll amidst the shadows, the line between fiction and reality blurs, and inescapable events begin to unfold. Like I said, this is a horror sort of jump scare kind of game. I can definitely see streamers playing this game for a Halloween type of a show or recording. The playtime end to end, I think it's about 7 hours long. It's not horrible. I mean, if you like jump scares and being scared and stealth type of gameplay, but once again, that's not my cup of tea. But I would definitely watch someone playing this, especially if they react to jump scares. The puzzles were not super challenging. A lot of times I had more trouble with escaping when I'm running away from things more than the puzzles. But it was okay. It was not a bad game. You just got to look around, find your objects. Actually, you know what? When it started, I was reminded of the Suda51 game that was never released in the United States called Michigan Report from Hell. It was a PlayStation 2 game. Not the gameplay itself, because the gameplay was sort of like you played from the first-person perspective, but you controlled another character by telling them what to do and pointing your camera instead of the first-person stuff. Unfortunately, there isn't any filming minigame kind of stuff that occurs in the story of The Bridge Curse 2. Sort of a missed opportunity, but it does do what it sets out to do, which is scare you or make you jump if you're prone to that sort of reaction. Like I said, it kind of gave me that Michigan Report from Hell, not the mutants or anything. I just thought of it. Not my kind of game. I may have played the Suda51 game when it came out because of its unique sort of control scheme, but it wasn't very long to play through the whole story. So yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, if you like scary stuff, scary games, go ahead and check it out. I will put the link to the Steam page in the show notes. You can get it on PlayStation as well. Not bad. It's just not my kind of game. So anyway, next I'm going to move on to reciting my eulogy for you. So yeah, here we go. In memory of Bash. I was sitting in my living room, ruminating over the loss of my amazing boy. The slightly unaware 8-year-old Mango was trying to console me the best he could. Bash was the only other feline companion he had ever known since I had taken him in after Bash's littermate passed away at the age of 13. Even though he and Boo weren't the closest of pals, when he was no longer a presence in the apartment, Bash was left confused and presumably depressed. In hindsight, it was far more likely that I was projecting human emotions upon him. When Mango arrived, Bash assumed the role of big brother and reluctant mentor for the far more mischievous Pipsqueak. In his absence, I was now the alpha, so now he is following me everywhere in the apartment instead of Bash, whose territory included the comfortable poang in the living room. I sat there and sobbed while a perplexed Mango purred as I stroked him while he bore witness to my sadness. Then the waterworks suddenly stopped. I turned on my PlayStation 5 and started playing video games. When I finally realized the events as they unfurled in their predictable sequence, I chuckled as a strong memory of an interaction between a dear friend of mine and me emerged. Something that was once just an amusing anecdote had just been bound to my loss in a profoundly meaningful way, and it made me realize just how lucky I was to have certain beings in my life. I was never a cat person growing up. My father and stepmother had cats, but I never interacted with them much. And then there was one time during my junior year of high school when I clandestinely tried to take care of a neighborhood stray hanging out in the back stairway of the apartment where my mother, brother, and I were living. That effort was doomed to fail because of my mother's severe allergies. I was mildly so, but it was tolerable enough for incidental contact. I watched a friend's cat in Sunnyvale, California once while I was on an extended business trip, and then back in Tucson, Arizona, I briefly dated a stripper whose daughter desperately wanted a pet. Almost serendipitously, along came the later-to-be-named Mungo, a young black cat who would visit me whenever I was smoking a cigarette outside my apartment in the late evening hours. It was mid-October, and I had posited that he would be in grave danger that time of year, so I invited him into my home as a guest whenever he showed interest. Eventually, I concluded that breathing comfortably with the dander he generated was nearly impossible, so I gave him to Kaz and her daughter. Many years later, I met my now best friend Michaela, but at the time we were dating. I would come over to her apartment where we would watch movies or play Xbox, sometimes both. As I was becoming more fond of her, I was also growing fond of the company of her cats, Samantha and Tabitha, named after the Bewitched characters. There were sniffles, sneezes, and wheezes that accompanied the arrangement, but it was manageable. Being smitten with them probably didn't hurt much either. Then one day in April 2004, Michaela told me that the person that she got Samantha from had a litter of kittens in their home and that she wanted to visit them. I was still a little hesitant about taking the pet ownership plunge because I had my heart set on getting a Sony Aibo robotic dog for some reason. In retrospect, a programmable pet that was about as useful as a Roomba without suction abilities wasn't the best companion choice, but I think I was just being my weird nonconformist self. On our way there, I told Michaela that unless I felt some sort of connection, I wasn't going to be interested in getting a cat. I had only seen a litter of kittens once before, when a good friend of my brother, the first drummer of the Alkaline Trio's cat, many years before he was in the band, was pregnant. I would come over after school to hang out with his brother Joel. We would spend hours in his basement room, noodling with his Commodore 64 or listening to Genesis or Van Halen. But as the impending labor approached, we would also check out the dark closet upstairs in Glenn's room to see how the pregnancy was coming along. Until one day it happened. It was more of a novelty to me back then instead of a miracle of life, but it was heartwarming in any event. Shortly thereafter, car ownership expanded my travel distance far beyond where my bicycle had taken me previously. I could drive myself and passengers to any number of arcades whenever I desired, so the experience of witnessing kittens being born soon faded into the mundanity of my teenage day-to-day happenings and shopping mall visits. We arrived at the home, where we were led to a utility room where they were being kept, in an area accessible only by high-jumping, nimble felines. Upon entering, I saw 5 kittens, each one small enough to balance on the palm of my hand. I sat down on the floor, watched them playing a bit, and immediately came to terms with the fact that I would be going home with 2 of them that day. The group consisted of 2 black males, 2 orange males, and a single fluffy white female with gray patches. The first one that caught my eye was the tiniest of the bunch, the bat cat, whose ears were far too big for his head. I would name him Boo. Then I noticed one of the orange kitties was clumsily trying to crawl onto my lap. He fell off my khaki shorts a number of times, but he persisted until he finally reached the pinnacle. I would name him Bash. Shortly thereafter, Michaela and I would move in together. She ended up adopting the female from the litter and naming her Misty. So in total, we had 5 cats in the decently sized guest house we were renting from a mutual acquaintance. Samantha was used to running the show in her previous arrangement, so she was hell-bent on dictating the tone and the goings-on of her new territory as well. Boo gave her a very wide berth and mostly ignored her, but Bash tried to connect with her. Unfortunately, his futile attempts were met by hisses and swats, so he would retreat to my or Michaela's general area after these encounters. We had 2 litter box areas in the guest house. One was in the back hall connected to the bedroom, and the other was in a tucked-away corner of the kitchen behind a cat-sized flap underneath the cultured granite countertop and directly to the left of the 2-tiered Lazy Susan-style storage area. Both Michaela and I had noticed that Samantha would follow Bash into the bathroom and wait outside the flap so she could swat at him upon exiting, or perhaps deviously trap him in there perpetually. As soon as either of us witnessed this antagonistic behavior, we would shoo her away, gently coax Bash out of the enclosure, and assure him that he was safe from one of our 2 feline witches. Bash was incredibly tolerant of humans and animals alike. He would provide a number of obvious yet polite hints when his patience was wearing thin. It was a behavior that I had observed in him at a very young age whenever I would give him a bath, clip his nails, administer medication, etc. He would motion like he was going to bite my arm and stop when his canines touched the skin, and then he'd look back at me as if to say, "I could do that to you for real, you know." You were completely safe as long as you heeded any of his liberal supply of warnings. One day, I came home from work, and Michaela greeted me at the door, stating proudly that he had finally asserted himself. Samantha kept pestering Bash, I looked over at the two of them. Bash looked at me, back at Sam, and then he beat the crap out of her, she told me. Samantha learned the lesson and kept her distance from that day forward. Over the course of his 21 years, Michaela has often mentioned that Bash and I had an especially strong emotional connection to each other. I paid the sentiments no mind at the time, but as I reminisce about it now, I realize that our bond would have been obvious to even the most casual of observers. Around the end of the year, holiday time in 2004, I had to go on a business trip to the Silicon Valley. It would take me thousands of miles away for a week or so, the longest I'd ever been away from the boys since welcoming them into my life. Never having had pets of my own before, I was worried by the ridiculous notion that Boo and Bash would suddenly forget who I was after being away for an extended period of time. But my absence came and went somewhat uneventfully, their memories of me intact. I arrived back at the guest house a few hours after noon. Exhausted and sapped of energy from my travels, I collapsed upon the bed, still wearing the same edgy flames-on black button-up shirt I'd put on before the sun began to rise earlier that morning. Just a quick little power nap before dinner time, I thought. I awoke hours later. Until I heard the light clanging sounds of the cooking utensils against mixing bowls and pans, I was unaware that Michaela had already arrived back home from her workday and was busy cooking dinner in the kitchen. Shifting slightly, I was just about to get up when I realized there was a weight perched upon my chest. It was Bash, staring at me intently. Underneath the cozy, cat-warmed quilt, I stroked the fur on his back and scratched my way up towards his head and ears. Michaela heard my stirring, so she rushed in to the bedroom, excitedly wanting to show me a picture she took on her digital camera. Apparently, Bash had been watching me for the duration of my nap, or at least as long as she had been at home. Out of context, the picture was quite humorous, like Bash was deviously calculating or pondering how he would dispose of all the piercings after gnawing my face off. Michaela submitted the photo to the now-defunct www.mycathatesyou.com, to which it was accepted as an example of cats despising their owners. But we all knew that the snarky caption added by the site couldn't have been further from the truth. Bash's favorite treat was shrimp, so when he weakly refused to eat them 2 days before his passing, I knew the end of my time with him was near. I tried to steel myself emotionally the best that I could as he fell asleep on my lap while I was playing video games, a regular occurrence for the last couple of years. I grabbed a handful of the miniature cooked and peeled salad shrimp, tossed them into my mouth, and thought of the day Michaela and I had discovered Bash's penchant for the crustacean. I was in the living room watching some television while she was engaging in food preparation activities. The living room and kitchen were connected not by walls or a door, but by an open space, so there was a direct line of sight between the couch and the kitchen sink. Suddenly I heard Michaela shriek, "Bash, no!" I turned my head towards the source of the yelling and saw my startled cutie frozen in place with thawed shrimp, tail and all, hanging out of his mouth. Time stood still for a moment, and then Bash scampered away with his prize. Both of us couldn't help but laugh. It was very unlike him to sneak around the abode, let alone try to grab any of our human food. Michaela surveyed the colander of remaining shrimp thawing in the sink and estimated that he had likely eaten 2 or 3 more of them before noticing the misdemeanor, a suspicion we confirmed later when we found the forensic evidence of dried shrimp indigestibles hidden around the house. After half an hour or so of sitting in my apartment and remembering the joy and memories he brought, Michaela drove us to the veterinarian's office. I had his still warm yet frail body cradled in a solid blue-colored flannel that my late grandfather used to wear, given to me by my late father. When we arrived, we were escorted to one of the examination rooms. After a little bit of tension-breaking chit-chat, I handed Bash to the veterinary technician in preparation for connecting him up to the intravenous catheter apparatus. She brought him back into the room along with the doctor who had explained the end-to-end process to me earlier. Michaela and I said our tearful goodbyes. I caressed him lovingly for what would be the last time. Fluid was injected, and within mere seconds he fell asleep and passed away peacefully. The The whole ordeal was emotionally draining, so following that, Michaela and I grabbed some breakfast before she drove me home. I immediately went to bed with Bash's brother from another mother, Mango, curled up beside my head on one of my down-filled pillows. I awoke hungry, so I went to the kitchen and threw a couple of frozen dinners in the microwave. I solemnly prepared a single bowl of soft cat food, placed it on the food mat, and retreated to the living room area to wait for my meal to be ready for consumption. Sitting there, I was suddenly overcome with a wave of sadness, missing Bash's presence in an instant. The crying commenced, and Mango did his best to comfort me by sitting on my lap and purring as if to say, "I'm still here for you, buddy." Minutes passed, the tears stopped flowing, and I turned on my television and PS5 and started to play. Then came the realization and the chortling. Back when Michaela and I were dating, and Bash was an important fixture in both of our day-to-day lives, I was thinking about computer games that Michaela would enjoy while I was perusing the software aisle at my local Best Buy. Whether it was true or not, I sometimes got the feeling that she only played video games because I loved them so much. But knowing the games that she had gravitated toward previously, it occurred to me that The Sims would be a perfect fit for her as a present. For her birthday, I gave her the complete original Sims collection and the newly released The Sims 2, which I was mildly interested in checking out myself. Over the course of the month that followed, Michaela had so much fun with the first series of The Sims that she started playing the other as well. To her, the most compelling feature addition for the sequel was the Create a Sim function, so she proceeded to create a version of her and a version of me in the game. A few days passed, and then one day after work, I walked into the house, and she proclaimed with a hint of annoyance, "I'm mad at you." Having no clue what I had done to provoke such anger, I asked her to explain. She pointed at the computer monitor and said, "I died, you cried for about a minute, and then started playing video games." We both laughed as I responded, "I hate to break it to you, hon, but this is exactly how it would happen in real life." This intense memory of a programmed character imitating a piece of my life so accurately, even now, is oddly comforting to me. As I sat there grieving in my own internally coded way, a realization was illuminated like the pixelated scenery I gazed upon from my semi-disposable Scandinavian furniture. The beings I have loved or have yet to love in this lifetime will come and go, as the cycle of existence and the passage of time itself dictates. But the empathy and memories and friendships will continue far beyond the 21 years Bash had shared his life with me. Friends, family, felines, I'm immensely thankful for all of you being supportive on my journey. Thank you, Nora, Michaela, Mango, and especially Bash, for being there for me through thick and thin and making my life feel more meaningful. I will miss Bash's unconditional affection, enduring spirit, and uplifting warmth, but I will love you all forever. All right, so there we go. That was my Bash eulogy. Next week, we've got the dragon episode. And then I have an interview I got to do with Doug from Small Rice Studios. They just made a game called Roast. It's a card game. I initially found it on Kickstarter, and that should be after the dragon episode. Thank you for letting me share that with you. I appreciate that. And thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Too Vague Podcast. My name is Ben, and have a wonderful night. Bye.